Be silent in old age to live longer and happier. 7. Powerful benefits of silence for seniors. Have you ever realized that sometimes silence can carry more meaning than 1,000 words? As we get older, the world around us seems to grow noisier. Faster moving technologies, nonstop news, buzzing notifications, and a constant stream of conversations. It's easy to feel overwhelmed. But what if the real path to peace, clarity, and even longer life wasn't in doing more, but in doing less and saying less? Silence is not just a lack of sound. It's a powerful state of being that can refresh the mind, soothe the heart, and restore the body. In fact, as we age, quiet moments become more than peaceful. They become essential. In today's video, we'll explore 7 compelling reasons why embracing silence in your golden years can transform the way you live, physically, emotionally, and even spiritually. Some of these might surprise you. By the end of this video, you'll see why silence is not just golden. It's deeply healing. Stay with us until the very end, because what you discover today might change how you age and how you embrace the quiet moments that make life truly meaningful. Let's begin with the first reason. 1. Deepen self-reflection and personal insight. There's something sacred that happens when the world gets quiet and we finally start to hear ourselves, not the noise in our heads, not the expectations of others, but the quiet voice deep within us, the one we often ignored when life was busier, louder, more demanding. Silence gives that voice space to speak. And at this stage of life, what that voice often brings is memory. Sometimes it's gentle, like the scent of a Sunday morning or the laugh of someone long gone. Other times it's raw, a regret that never got addressed, a question we've carried for decades, a moment we still wish had gone differently. But here's the beautiful truth. Silence gives us the chance to look back, not to get stuck, but to understand, to soften, to forgive. Let me tell you about Robert, 77, from Vermont. For most of his life, Robert was a man of action, veteran, entrepreneur, provider. He was proud, but also, he admits, emotionally distant. Now retired, widowed, and living in a small cabin near the forest, he spends most evenings sitting on his porch with a notebook in his lap. He doesn't write every night. Sometimes he just stares into the trees. One evening he told me, "I never thought silence would teach me so much. I've cried more in the last 6 months than I did in 40 years, but I've also remembered more love than I thought I had left." That's what reflection does. It clears the fog of our busy years and brings back the emotional truth of who we are. And the science supports this. According to a study published in the Journal of Aging Studies, regular periods of silence enhance autobiographical memory and promote emotional resolution in adults over 65. In simple terms, it helps us make peace with our past. When we sit in silence, we're not avoiding life. We're reviewing it, re-seeing the moments that shaped us, re-feeling the joys and the sorrows, and sometimes finally releasing what we've been quietly carrying. Because reflection isn't just about remembering, it's about reclaiming your own story on your own terms. So let me gently ask you, what have you been carrying that you haven't had the space to lay down? When was the last time you truly sat with your memories, not as a burden, but as a bridge to understanding yourself? If these words stir something in you, share a small piece of your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it. Click like if you believe that silence can heal what time alone cannot. And subscribe to Golden Wise Elders, because this is a place where your voice, your life, and your reflections deeply matter. And as we reflect, we begin to notice something else. The more we sit with our memories, the more we long to be present for the moment still ahead. That's where silence leads us next, into mindfulness. Because once we've made peace with where we've been, we start to listen more deeply to where we are. Reason 2 encourages mindful living. As we grow older, time plays a curious trick on us. The days often feel longer, yet somehow, the years slip by faster than ever. One morning you wake up and realize it's been a decade since you truly sat still. That's when silence becomes more than a pause. It becomes a choice, a way of living that helps us reconnect with the life right in front of us. Not long ago, I spoke with Harold, 68 years old, retired, living just outside Santa Fe, New Mexico. Every afternoon around 4:30, he steps out onto his front porch. He brings a cup of mint tea and an old paperback, but more often than not, the book stays closed. He told me something that struck a chord. I used to fill every minute with noise, music, TV, even just background chatter. But when I started sitting quietly each day, something shifted. I could hear birds I hadn't noticed before. I felt the sunlight differently. I even started smelling the breeze. That quiet changed more than just his afternoons. It changed how he experienced life, and he's not alone. A study from the UCLA Mindfulness Lab showed that just 10 minutes of quiet per day can lower the risk of depression in adults over 60 by 27%. It also helps regulate mood, improve sleep, and restore emotional balance. This happens because silence allows your parasympathetic nervous system, your body's natural healing mode, to take over. It slows your heart rate, lowers stress hormones, and signals to your body that it's safe to relax. You don't need to meditate in lotus position or chant mantras. Just turn off the TV. Put down your phone. Sit by a window. Close your eyes. Breathe. That's where presence begins at. John Kabat-Zinn once said, "Silence is the soil where mindfulness grows." And I couldn't agree more. In the silence, we stop rushing through life and start noticing it. We don't just drink tea, we taste it. We don't just exist, we arrive. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you truly heard a leaf fall or felt the warmth of sunlight resting on your hands? If that made you pause even for a second, this video is meant for you. Please tap like if this resonates. Comment below and tell us about a quiet moment that meant something to you. And something interesting happens when we start slowing down and truly paying attention to life around us. We realize we don't need to do as much, say as much, or push as hard as we used to. In fact, it's often in those quiet, mindful moments that we begin to reclaim our energy bit by bit. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply pause. Reason 3, preserves energy. If there's one truth that becomes more apparent with age, it's this. Energy is no longer something we can take for granted. When we were younger, we could juggle 5 things at once, talk endlessly on the phone, multitask, and still have energy left for the evening news. But now, just one emotionally charged conversation, a loud household, a full day of back-to-back errands, and suddenly we're drained, not just tired, but spent. That's why silence matters more now than ever. Silence is not laziness, it's not passivity, it's strategic recovery. It's how the body and the spirit recharge. I think of Ruth. She's 74 and lives alone in Tacoma, Washington. She used to fill her days with appointments, clubs, Zoom calls with family, always doing something. But she kept finding herself exhausted, mentally foggy, and emotionally worn out. One day her daughter said, "Mom, you're always busy, but you never look rested." And that landed. So Ruth made a small change. She started scheduling what she calls stillness breaks. 3 times a day, 15 minutes of no TV, no phone, no talking, just sitting. Sometimes with a cup of tea, sometimes watching the light change on the wall. And slowly, her energy returned. Not just physical, but emotional. Science backs her up. According to a study from the National Institute on Aging, seniors who practice 30 minutes of intentional silence daily reported significantly lower fatigue levels and higher mental clarity compared to those constantly surrounded by noise and activity. Why? Because mental stimulation consumes physical energy. Every noise, every interruption, every conversation, no matter how small, demands a bit of our internal battery. And when you're older, that battery needs more careful charging. Think of it this way. You wouldn't leave your phone screen on all night and expect it to be fully charged by morning. So why expect your body to thrive in constant noise without pause? Silence is your built-in charger. It's where your nervous system settles, your breathing slows, and your inner reserves begin to refill, bit by bit, moment by moment. And no, this doesn't mean cutting yourself off from loved ones or the world. It means giving yourself permission to rest without guilt, to step back, to soften, to let your soul breathe. So let me ask you gently, are you using your energy to truly live? Or are you pouring it into things that just leave you empty? And once we begin to honor our energy, not by pushing through, but by allowing rest, something beautiful starts to happen. In that space of stillness, where we no longer rush or force, our imagination slowly stretches its wings. Because silence isn't just a way to recover, it's also a quiet invitation to create. Reason 4, boosts creativity. There's a quiet kind of magic that happens when the noise finally fades. You may have noticed it, those soft moments when your mind begins to wander, not out of distraction, but out of possibility. A memory surfaces, a new idea takes shape. A long-forgotten dream taps gently on your shoulder asking, "Remember me?" That's creativity, and it thrives in silence. You don't need to be a painter, a poet, or a composer. You just need space, mental space, for new thoughts to bloom. Let me tell you about Sharon. She's 70, living in Asheville, North Carolina. After retiring from a 40-year career in accounting, she thought her most productive years were behind her. But then, during quiet mornings at home, no emails, no meetings, just her and a steaming mug of chamomile, Sharon started sketching again. First it was flowers, then birds. Now every Wednesday she teaches watercolor to a small group of seniors at the community center. Not for money, not for praise, just for the joy of watching colors dance on paper. She once told me, "I never knew I had this in me. I just needed quiet so I could finally hear it." And science is catching up. Research from the University of California, Irvine, shows that older adults who spend intentional time in silence report higher levels of cognitive flexibility, imagination, and creative engagement. It's the brain's way of saying, now that we've cleared the clutter, let's make something beautiful. But creativity doesn't have to be art. It can be the way you rearrange your garden, the way you write a heartfelt letter to your grandchild, the way you find a new recipe and make it your own. Silence gives you room to wonder, and wonder at any age is where life begins to feel fresh again. So let me ask you, what's one quiet thing that brings you joy? Something you haven't done in a while, but miss deeply? If something just came to mind, I hope you write it in the comments. Let it breathe. Let it come alive again. Tap like if you believe that creativity doesn't retire. And subscribe to Golden Wise Elders, where we celebrate the wisdom of reinvention, even in the stillest moments of life. And as creativity quietly awakens within us, something else starts to shift too. The mental fog begins to lift. In the quiet, where we've made space to imagine, to reflect, we also begin to think more clearly, more intentionally, because silence doesn't just inspire beauty, it helps us find clarity. Reason 5. Enhances mental clarity. Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you came? Or stared at a to-do list only to feel overwhelmed by everything and nothing at once? It's not just aging, it's the constant mental noise we carry. The news, notifications, conversations, old worries that never got resolved, even that song stuck in your head for 3 days. Our minds are filled to the brim, yet we rarely give them a moment to rest. That's where silence becomes more than just comforting. It becomes cleansing. Let me introduce you to Thomas. He's 73, living in Eugene, Oregon. A former high school principal, Thomas was once used to the sounds of bells ringing, kids laughing, staff meetings, announcements. Noise was part of his identity. But retirement brought a strange kind of disorientation. Without the structure of daily busyness, his mind felt cluttered, not calm. So he started a new routine. Every morning, before breakfast, he sits by the window with nothing but a cup of black coffee and a legal pad. He doesn't write a to-do list. He writes whatever is on his mind until the thoughts slow down, until his breathing matches the rhythm of the birds outside. He told me, "I used to feel like my brain was a messy desk. Silence helped me file things away," and science agrees. Research published in the journal Brain Structure and Function found that 2 minutes of silence, just 2, can be more beneficial for the brain than listening to relaxing music. It activates the default mode network, the part of your brain responsible for processing emotions, memories, and complex thoughts. In other words, silence gives your brain room to breathe. It clears the fog, sorts the mess, and helps you return to what truly matters. Because when your mind is clear, your choices are wiser, your relationships are gentler, and your sense of self becomes stronger. You begin to respond instead of react. So I'd love to ask you, what's one small change you could make each day to give your mind just a little more space? If you're already practicing this, share what's helped you. If you're just beginning, let this be your first gentle step. And when our minds begin to clear, something beautiful starts to happen in the spaces between us. We stop rushing to respond and start learning to truly listen. Because clarity doesn't just change how we think, it changes how we connect. Reason 6. Strengthens relationships. In a world that's constantly talking, we've forgotten just how powerful it is to simply be there for someone without saying a word. Sometimes the most profound connection isn't built through conversation, but through shared silence. I think of Helen and George, married 51 years, living in a quiet lakeside home in Minnesota. They've long passed the need to fill every silence. Each morning they sit on their porch, side by side, watching the sun climb slowly over the water. No talking, just coffee, gentle smiles, and presence. One morning Helen said something that moved me deeply. She turned to George, touched his hand, and whispered, "You don't have to say anything. I already know." That's the kind of understanding that grows in silence. It's not withdrawal. It's deep presence, the kind where you don't just hear, you feel. And the science is catching up to what couples like Helen and George have always known. Studies from the University of Michigan show that intentional silence within close relationships can increase feelings of trust, empathy, and emotional security, especially in long-term partnerships. In simpler words, silence, when shared with love, becomes a language of its own. It's in those quiet moments that we hear what isn't being said, give space for others to be fully themselves, and remind each other, I'm here, I see you, I care. Whether it's a grandchild too overwhelmed to talk, a spouse grieving quietly, or a friend simply sitting beside you on a bench. Your silent presence may be the most healing thing you offer. So let me ask from the heart, who in your life might need you to be with them? Not with words, but with your gentle, quiet presence. If someone came to mind, maybe today's the day to reach out. Not with a big speech. Just be there. Click like if you've ever felt truly understood in silence. And join our growing family here at Golden Wise Elders by subscribing, where we believe love often speaks the loudest when we say nothing at all, and when we allow silence to strengthen our bonds, not with more words, but with deeper presence. We begin to notice another quiet gift it offers: peace. The kind that doesn't come from solving every problem, but from simply letting go of the noise inside us. Reason 7. Reduces stress and anxiety. GM stress valoo. Let's be honest, growing older doesn't always mean growing calmer. If anything, the worries can feel heavier. Health concerns, family tensions, finances, questions about the future, or regrets from the past. And even when our homes are quiet, our minds can still feel unbearably loud. That's why silence isn't just soothing, it's essential. Because silence doesn't mean avoidance. It means allowing your nervous system to rest. It means giving your mind space to settle, your breath room to slow down, and your heart permission to just be. Let me share with you the story of Diane, 69, from Charleston, South Carolina. After losing her husband, Diane found herself overwhelmed by grief and anxiety. The noise of the TV felt too much. Even kind conversations exhausted her, so she began a small ritual. Every evening before bed, she'd sit by her bedroom window for 15 minutes. No phone, no music, just the moonlight and her breath. At first it felt uncomfortable, then it felt necessary. She told me that I thought silence would remind me I was alone, but it reminded me I was still here. Today, Diane says those 15 minutes are her anchor. Her pulse steadies, her thoughts untangle, and slowly her life feels less like survival and more like peace. Science, once again, supports what Diane discovered intuitively. A study from the American Heart Association found that daily exposure to intentional silence can lower blood pressure, reduce levels of cortisol, and significantly decrease symptoms of anxiety in older adults. Even just 10 minutes of quiet breathing can begin to retrain your stress response. Because the truth is, we don't always need to fix what hurts. Sometimes we just need to sit beside it, quietly, until it softens. So let me ask you, where in your day could you create just a little pocket of peace? Not as an escape, but as a gift to yourself. If this resonates, leave a comment below with the time of day you most long for stillness. So now we've come full circle. We've explored how silence isn't just a pause between words, but a doorway to clearer thoughts, deeper relationships, renewed energy, and yes, even healing. Each reason we shared today isn't just a fact, it's an invitation to return to something many of us have been missing for far too long, ourselves. Because the truth is, silence isn't loneliness, it's a sacred space where you can finally meet the calmest, fullest version of who you are. If you've spent most of your life showing up for others, raising families, building careers, giving love endlessly, then maybe now in this chapter, you're allowed to slow down, to sit still, to listen, not to the world, but to your own soul. Even 5 minutes a day of intentional quiet can shift everything, not all at once, not magically, but gently, like the morning sun creeping across your floor, slow, warm, and steady. So here's our gentle wish for you. May you find moments of quiet that restore you. May you discover that stillness doesn't shrink life, it deepens it. And may you never feel guilty for choosing peace. If something in this video touched your heart, please tap like, not for us, but for you. Let it be your quiet yes to yourself. Share in the comments, what's one silent moment you treasure or hope to create? And if you believe, as we do, that aging is not about fading, but about unfolding, then please subscribe to Golden Wise Elders and hit the bell so you won't miss the next moment of stillness we share together. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, not just to us, but to yourself. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay gentle, stay grounded, and stay quietly, beautifully